This Mass, I want to actually share with you my fear and regret during COVID-19 pandemic. I almost have a heart attack recently. This is my heartbeat, up and down, straight away go up so much. This heartbeat of mine was very much controlled by the daily report of COVID cases for the past few days. It may not be my heartbeat alone. Probably it's also your heartbeat, relying on the daily cases of COVID-19. Our lives nowadays may like a roller coaster, going up and down, according to the number of cases reported by the government. When the case is low, we feel very much relaxed. When the case suddenly shoot up, we get so worried, so frightened, until almost frightened to death. I guess if this time of heartbeat of mine, it's just a matter of time, I may die of heart attack. Due to the uncertainties, for we only rely on the cases out there beyond our control, there is always fear in us, and thus we dare not to do a lot of things. Let me ask you these questions. Have I stopped living my life meaningfully due to the fear of COVID-19? Before MCO, it's my joy of going home once a week, spending time with mom and my family. Due to COVID-19, during the MCO, I used to think of not going home for fearful of affecting my mom, as she is in the so-called high-risk category. Guess what? One parishioner told me after the 3 months MCO, when we turned to RMCO, she shared with me one of the incidences that she went through. She went to visit one very good friend, our parishioner. At that time, she could not recognize her anymore, though they were very close before MCO. She asked her, "你係邊個喎?" The effect of 3 months for not doing anything has affected the person a lot. Then I asked myself, how long more do I have to wait? What if this COVID-19 lasts for a few years? Would I regret if anything happened during this time and I didn't do anything that I should for being overcautious? The World Health Organization has already told us that it may take a year or more to get vaccine for COVID-19. And Japan and a few other countries have already expressed that we may have to coexist with this COVID-19. In other words, it may take a long, long time for us to go back to so-called previous new normal. Instead of being fearful and then regret for not living our life meaningfully during this COVID-19, I believe it is good for us to deal with our fear positively with necessary SOP and placing our trust in God. Today's gospel reading, the disciples were frightened as well. Then how did they cope? The disciples, firstly, they saw, they saw Jesus walking on the sea. They were terrified. It's a ghost. They were very, very frightened. And at once, Jesus said that, "It is I, courage, do not be afraid." With these words, Jesus assured them that He was with them. And because of this realization of God was with them, their fear was disappeared. After this, St. Peter once again unknowingly asking God, "God, if it is you, let me walk." He got out of the boat and began to walk on the water towards Jesus. When he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened again and beginning to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." At once, Jesus stretched out his hands and caught him. He was at peace, and his fear was disappeared, for knowing that God was with them. The rough sea in the gospel reading is almost like COVID-19 that we are going through, very frightening. So we can be like the disciples in dealing with our fear by knowing that God is with us, Emmanuel. Our challenge is that, am I conscious that God is with me, Emmanuel? Like it or not, we have to recognize that this COVID-19 pandemic will not go off so soon. And we have to face this COVID-19 pandemic with more stability unless and until we have greater faith in God, knowing that He is with us. We will never be able to face it with courage. In the first reading, taken from the first book of the Kings, it shows us that Prophet Elijah, didn't find God in the strong wind, in the fire, in the earthquake. But when there was a tiny whispering sound, very silent, Elijah hid his face in his cloak and then stood at the entrance of the cave, for he realized that God is there with him. When we are troubled, disturbed, frightened, we are like going through heavy wave, strong wind, earthquake, and fire, where we normally feel to recognize that God is there for us, is something frightening. If we keep on looking around, going to look for alternative, the way to help us, it's just like the first picture. The water keep on being stirring by our looking around, unless and until we put ourselves before the Lord in silence. That's when the water becomes still. Then we can recognize that God is there with us and for us. Only then we can surrender before the Lord and continue to live our lives in the midst of our fearful situation and challenging moment. So my dear brothers and sisters in Christ, let's face the reality of this new norm with new normal way of life. Let's not regret to live a meaningful life despite the fear of COVID-19. We always hear this phrase, we do our best and let God do the rest. While we are trying to do our best by observing SOP, which is proven able to reduce the risk of being infected, as well as with social distancing, washing our hands and personal hygiene. While we are doing our best by doing so, and not sharing fake news with others, and not letting fake news affecting us, we have won the battle. We have won the battle 50%. And then the moment we do our best and let God do the rest, where we know that God is there for us. Finally, did I go back to my mom in the midst of my own fear? I did, and I do. While meeting so many people, so many parishioners, at the same time, I may have to go to hospital for sick call. I try my best to protect myself. No one will know who is the carrier, surely. But I place my trust in God by doing my best in observing SOP. At the same time, surrender to God. For I know that God is there for us. And on top of this, I don't want to regret. I don't want to regret for not going home to see mom just because of my fear. So my dear brothers and sisters in Christ, it's important to face our fear. Let's pause for a moment in silence. Always bring before the Lord whatever fear that we have. And let us once again listen to God saying to us, "Is I, do not be afraid, for I am with you always until the end of time." Let us pause a moment, surrender whatever fear that we have in us to God.